Before we get started with today's video, we got to announce the winner of the Hometown Acres hat from the last one, where we were asking people to guess how much we were charging somebody for a custom milling project. I asked you guys to guess the total number of hours times an hourly rate and give me a total bid for that project. And Andrew Steiger 3846 was the closest. So his guess was $85 an hour times 4 hours for a total bid of $340. What we're actually charging was $75 an hour times 4.5 hours for $337.50. So Andrew Steiger, if you are watching this, you were $2.50 off from what we're charging. Go ahead and email us at hometownacres@outlook.com and we'll get your address and send you out a hat. Crazy neighbor Doug did it again. So a couple weeks ago, neighbor Doug texted me and said, hey, I've got a couple ideas for your log arch you have down there. If you guys haven't seen this before, I'll put a link to a video when we first got it and first put it to use. But there was a couple of improvements that Doug thought could be made to it and said, hey, do you care if I borrow this for a few days and come up with some modifications? And knowing Doug's affinity for creative problem solving, I was 100% on board. He is extremely talented at this kind of stuff and just making things better. The motto of his YouTube channel is there's gotta be a better way. So I gave Doug the green light to tinker away and he did not disappoint. This thing is far better than it was when we first got it. So we're gonna go over some of the modifications he did real quick and then we're gonna go put it to a real world test and go drag some logs out of the woods. All right, so the very first modification Doug did was add log tongs to this. Before, all you had was just a hook on the end of the winch line. And so you would have to fish that underneath the log and wrap it to itself in order to grab a hold of the log. This makes it so much easier to just quick connect to the log, reel it in, and quick disconnect. So the second modification was he added 2 more weld-on hooks. Originally it just came with this outside one and this outside one, which was fine if you were just carrying one big log. But if you're ever going to carry 2 smaller logs, you can see this gives you the option to carry 2 smaller logs now. It's a little windy today if you couldn't tell. So because he added 2 hooks to the back, he also had to add 2 hooks to the front, so that way you can tie up each log front and back individually. So if you are going to be chaining up 2 logs, Doug also had to add this log stop, because what would happen is as you're winching the log up, typically you're going to have the lighter end on the front here, and that would want to cantilever up, and so this is basically just a log stop to keep the log riding level. So another issue that we noticed was this log arch would only accept about a 10 or 11 foot log to keep it fully suspended off the ground. If you got any longer than that, there'd be too much weight out the back. The front end would be suspended, but the back end would just skid out of the woods, which we didn't want. My sawmill will take up to a 16-foot log, so we wanted to make the log arch long enough to take a log that would max out the sawmill if we ever needed to. So what we did was, well, what Doug did is he extended it 2 foot. So he basically cut this right in half, pulled this apart, and then re-welded this back together with 2 pieces of outside square channel. And the reason he did that, instead of just either adding a telescope piece or just adding another piece of 3-inch square tubing here, is when you're winching that log in from this point here, you can only bring it in so far before you're not able to pick it up anymore to get these chains underneath it. So by doing this and leaving this gap in here, you can now quickly disconnect this, pull this log tong and drop it down here, hook it here, and lift it up and suspend it in the air from this pivot point right here. So that allowed you to have 2 separate pivot points. Moving on from that, you can see there was a hand crank winch on here, and Doug had one of these old ATV 2,500 pound winches laying around and mounted this up, rewired it, added some alligator clamps to it, and now we can just run this straight to the battery of the side-by-side. And one thing we found when we were doing this is we were trying to reel it all the way out and crank it back in, and it would take you about 5 minutes to hand crank this back in. Having an electric winch is much faster. All right, so moving on to the final 2 things that he added is there are some tools that you're going to need when you're running this. One of them is this little axe here, and what this is used for is when you get the log tongs on a log, you know, you got a lot of pressure picking that log up, and these seat into the log. So having this handy to be able to rip those back out of the log, just a nice thing to have and make it a lot easier. And knowing neighbor Doug, if you've got a tool, there's got to be a place for it. So he welded on, I don't know, just a piece of pipe here that he bent in an oval shape that this fits right down in. I think it goes this way. Another tool that you may or may not need, since we had log tongs, you may not need this quite as much, but basically it's kind of like a fish tape, but it's more for the chains. If there's ever a reason that you do need to fish this under a log, you can quickly hook this up. And now you can take this, and it's bent, so you can fish it underneath the log and pull it back out the other side. So, and again, there's a place for that as well, just right here inside that square tubing. Yeah, I think that covers about all the mods that Doug did to this log arch. Let's go ahead and hop in, head back to the woods, and see if they work as well as we think they're going to. So the nice thing about this log arch is it's extremely lightweight, and you can just pick it up and walk it back to where you need it, because backing up in the woods can be challenging at times. So we'll just set this right here. Now it's a lot easier to back the side-by-side back up to this and hook it back up. There we go. All right, so now we're backed up to all our logs. We need to go ahead and hook up the winch to power. Like we talked about before, we got our alligator clips here. Take this off. Luckily for me, my battery is very easily accessible, just right here underneath the bed. Black to black and red to red. There we go. Let's check to see if we've got juice. Pull our winch controller out from its nice little hiding spot there. There we go. And like we mentioned before, this has a magnet on it, so stick it anywhere on the frame of the log arch. Pull forward a little bit. So this is where that notch in the middle here is real handy, because we can drop that down through here and now hook that up and pull it the rest of the way in. There we go. These are the new ones you welded on?
Yep.
We'll see how well you did welding. All right, now we need to, let it back out. Take these out, re-spool this back out.
All right. See if that'll do it.
And now lift up on the back end.
Picking it up.
There we go. nice thing about Doug lengthening this log arch is that you can see the log arch better. You have better visibility because it sticks out further. Plus, with that longer wheelbase, it's easier to turn and maneuver. It doesn't want to turn on a dime on you like a shorter wheelbase trailer would. All right, so now we need to go ahead and get this unloaded, raise the winch up just a bit, relieve the tension on these chains. Take the chain off just to get that out of the way. Lower it back down to the ground. Okay. Unspool the log tongs here. Drop this down through the center. Hook that there. Put some tension on that. Just enough to take the pressure off this chain. And there we go. Very simple setup, easy operation, ease of use, very well thought out. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, having that free spool on there that doesn't want to unwind on itself is very nice. All right, so we made it back into the woods, and we're going to take these small, I don't know, 5 or 6 inch diameter maple logs that we had cut down from a previous project, and we're just going to hand load those onto the chains, not use the winch because it's not really necessary. We can pick them up by hand, but just to show you how you can get multiple logs in here now with those extra weld-on hooks that Doug put on. All right, so that's how you'd carry out 2 logs. I think we could probably get all 4 if instead of doing 2 separate, the chain isn't long enough, otherwise we could get 2 on here. But I think what we're gonna do is just do 1 big basket and see if we can get all 4 on there.
Sit off the ground enough, a little more.
A little bit more.
I'll try to be a little more graceful.
Yep.
On my way. There you go.
Good? Heck yeah.
That's a decent amount of lumber to take out.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably get a little bit more in my tractor grapple, but this is so much more low impact and it's so much faster. I'm not tearing up the trails, and I can get out of the woods here in about 2 minutes, whereas the tractor would probably take 10. All right, guys, there you go. Our pull behind ATV log arch has officially been Dougified with some Dougifications. I use his name as a verb all the time now. Anytime I've got a problem that I think he could come up with a creative solution for, I give him a call and say, hey, stop over. I got something I need you to Dougify for me. And that's what his YouTube channel, One Eye Customs, is all about. I mentioned earlier that the slogan for his channel is there's gotta be a better way. And this is just another prime example of that. I would have used this log arch for years and years and years and never really thought that there would have been a good way to come up with any improvements for it, because it worked pretty good as it was. But after seeing what he came up with for improvements for this, it's just so much more user-friendly, that much more enjoyable to use between the power winch, the log tongs, the quick connect straight to the battery of the ATV. And it really just has me looking at things differently than I used to. Like I said, I would have just accepted this for what it was, and now it's got me starting to look at things and saying, okay, if this is what it is now, how can I make it better? So I'm going to leave a link down in the description to Doug's video where he comes up with all the ideas for this as well as implements them. I highly recommend you go check it out. Watching this guy work is truly inspiring, and it's going to get you thinking about things differently and how to make things better. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this one, give me a big thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.